Welcome, everybody. We meet in a week when, yet again, our industry is very much in the public spotlight. And while I will go on in a minute to talk about the theme of the conference, I will start by addressing those news headlines. The allegations made against Russell Brand are horrendous. And as the CEO of Channel 4 and as a woman in our industry, I found the behavior described in dispatches and the Sunday Times and the Times articles disgusting and saddening. The allegations, of course, need to be followed up further, and we and the BBC and Banijay are busy investigating. And Channel 4 has invited anyone who knows about this behavior to come to us. We've written to all our suppliers to say the same, and we've set up a process for people to contact us anonymously if they need to. They're not empty words or gestures from all of us. They are what is meant by our duty of care. We will seek to find out who knew, who was told what, and what was or wasn't referred up. But what is clear to me is that terrible behavior towards women was historically tolerated in our industry. And the clips we've seen as well provide a rather shocking jolt when one realizes what appeared on air not that long ago. The behavior is less prevalent now, but it's still a problem, and it's something that we must all confront. There is still more change that needs to come, and Channel 4, along with those others, are at the forefront of that change. However, our RTS conference was planned over many months, and while the agenda does not directly relate to the events of the past few days, I've no doubt our conversations will touch upon it. Now, turning to the theme of Cambridge this year, the theme might look like a statement, but in my mind it's framed very much as a question. Is there simply too much to watch? Or should that be asked in a way that's less happy sounding, especially for us, this group in our industry trying to run our businesses? Is there simply too much content? And with content as king, hasn't distribution now become King Kong? Now, it wasn't that good, the line, but thanks. Before we set off, I'll take it. Before we set off on this conference looking for the answers, let me share some brief reflections on our industry. The speed of change, our changing capability and our capacity to do new things has led to radical disruption. We've got multiple audiences, multiple platforms, multiple consumption habits, and the same content in multiple places. We've been in a frantic race for eyeballs and advertising dollars and subscription cash. And that race, like some kind of gigantic global Grand Prix, has been driven by hubristic spending on video creation. And now, right now, in this room and in others, we are coming to terms with the fact and the reality that this model simply doesn't work in the ways that we want it to. The uncontrolled proliferation and commodification of content has made content effectively limitless. But it's also why we feel like there's both too much to watch and sometimes nothing to watch, and why consumers are flipping between streamers like we used to flip between the channels. We see every day that there's not enough money, there aren't enough eyeballs, and there's too much video to sustain everything that we've created. I think our industry has already seen the great Netflix correction, and now we're in what I would call the great restart. It's a moment when our race is coming to a juddering halt, and we have to ask ourselves some very serious questions. The questions are particularly important here in the UK, where large numbers of us are motivated by public purpose rather than by shareholder returns. And one of the most obvious symbols of this juddering halt is the writers' strike. It may be happening on the other side of the Atlantic, but it represents a voice crying for this great restart. Not because it's a strike, I mean, let's face it, here they happen all the time, but because at its core, it's a cry from creative people for us to return to a model of contingent compensation. A return to a model where success and failure are shared imperatives. The model of creators having no back end and not needing to care about success simply hasn't worked. And over the next 2 days, you will hear sessions that address many of these questions. And hopefully, you'll have some fun, you'll hear from some industry stars, you'll get a chance to gossip, and you'll catch up with old friends. But first, for our session, opening the conference today, I want to focus our attention behind the question, is there too much to watch? So to start off with, here's a little VT summarizing what's going on out there in the video day.
Welcome, lucky viewers. For the next few minutes, you don't have to engage in awkward chit-chat with people whose name you've forgotten. It's time to settle in, listen up, and nod sagely while I hit you with some punchy stats and eccentric visual metaphors, all about those juicy eyeballs you're chasing. So, what, why, and how much video content do people watch on a daily basis? Spoiler alert, we watch a shitload. How much is that exactly? Well, whether we're watching at home or on the move, we still clock up to 324 minutes, or well over 5 hours every single day. And what do we do for the other 19 hours? That's obvious, isn't it? We try to decide what to watch as we trawl through the 170,000 hours of telly sitting on broadcast and subscription VOD libraries. And if you still have time to kill, there are roughly 800 million more videos on YouTube. Woo! With all that at our disposal, it's no surprise our choices are increasingly dictated by AI. In fact, as much as 60% of the content young'uns are watching is chosen by algorithms.
You will watch Ultimate Unboxing.
Ooh, Ultimate Unboxing, eh? I'll save that for later. But apart from spending hours watching random people unboxing stuff, how else are the 16 to 34-year-olds distracting themselves from the climate apocalypse and the fact they'll never be able to afford a house? Well, over 7 hours of their day is spent on socials. 2.5 of which is watching videos. But it's not all about learning the moonwalk from TikTok, as the average time using Facebook and the gram is still higher than YouTube and TikTok combined. But with all their smartphones and smartwatches, clever computers and fancy tablets, do the younglings still watch any good old traditional telly at all? When it comes to live TV, their daily dosage is only 33 minutes, just a quarter of the amount their parents watch. But don't panic, the age of the humble television isn't quite over. Whilst their elders might spend 80% of their time watching live programming, for the youngsters, the majority of their daily TV viewing, or nearly 2/3 to be specific, is actually with subscription content. So once you add in those SVODs, the younger generation still enjoy nearly 90 minutes of big screen action every single day. But these stats can only tell us so much. What's actually driving the choices people make? What do changing viewing habits mean for the content we produce? Does public service broadcasting still connect with young people at all? Fortunately for us, Channel 4 have commissioned new research to understand what those numbers really mean for broadcasters. Here's Alex Mahon to enlighten you all. I'm off to film myself unboxing some lager.
Thank you to Joe Lycett there for that summary. So to prepare for this session, 5 months ago, the Channel 4 team set out to determine what the new video day for consumers is really made up of. And we did an original research project. I'm going to talk to you a little about what we did and what we found, and then I'm going to ask some experts to join me on the stage to help interpret the research. Now, to make sure we were properly prepared, we set out to ask ourselves some harder questions than just, what is the video day? We asked, why has video grown so much that it now absorbs people more than 5 hours a day? How do types of content make people feel? And what are their emotional reactions to it? And what benefits do they get from watching? To do all this, we studied patterns of consumption with people representing different cohorts and communities across the UK. We monitored them, we interviewed them, and then we asked about their feelings, and we worked with behavioral psychologists to understand their motivations. We even deprived them of video and then monitored their ability to cope. And we merged it all with new Barb data to produce insights into how British people watch video in 2023. So first, the headlines. People watch over 5 hours of video a day. Not these people, obviously, but people. And the video day is lengthening. Short-form viewing has piled in on top of long-form viewing, and gaming's piled in on top of both. Video is the default leisure activity for most people in the UK. Our main motivation to view is to change our mindset, sometimes to quicken our pulses, sometimes to slow ourselves down and relax. Short-form is 25% of total video for older people, and it is a whopping 45% of video for younger people. And you may or may not be surprised to learn that we aren't actually happy about all of this video. In Britain, consumers feel anxious about video overload. But it's absolutely vital to understand that such anxiety is only caused by certain types of video viewing. We've classified video into 4 types, based on how people use them and how they react to them. First of all, type 1 is TV-like content. It appears on all long-form platforms, and consumers will watch it anywhere, and they watch it to relax. Type 2 is content that is completely about passions, hobbies, and interest areas, and is very purposeful. Type 3 is practical. It's helping people to do something. It's informing them or educating them or inspiring them. And finally, type 4 is what I like to call the doom scroll, the time filling. And it's worth highlighting as you look at this chart that YouTube appears in many places. YouTube fulfills many consumption patterns and demands, whether that be passion or purpose, expertise, information, and traditional long form. But viewers worry about the pervasiveness and the ubiquity of a certain type of video content. Our research shows that many people associate their short-form social media consumption with feeling a lack of control. Their decision to seek an occupation for their downtime is conscious and it is intentional, but it doesn't apply to the specific content they subsequently consume, for the simple reason that the content they get is algorithmically served rather than selected. When the algorithm is in charge, people say they feel emotionally out of control. The immediate dopamine hit fades rapidly, and they're left feeling empty. They report a sense that their lives have been encroached upon. This is evidence that conscious human editorial curation of long-form video gives a very positive advantage to our industry. But we shouldn't paint all short-form video and social media viewing as negative. The research shows that where short-form is intentionally sought out and when it serves a purpose, then the payoff is much more positive. Importantly, the experience of viewing short-form has made people appreciate long-form more. They know that they use it to relax, they use it to calm down. It creates for them a positive mindset, and they see this kind of video as more controlled, more of their own choice, and more as the result of their own careful and intentional decision-making. And this adds to the sense they have that what they're doing serves their own agenda. Equally valuable to us is the fact that people welcome the fact that TV content is often watched with others. It brings a sense of community and of cultural connection. And it should stress that those effects hold true whether people are watching on a TV player, on an S-Fold, or on YouTube. There is still a bonus for PSBs. Small hooray. But because our research found that British audiences also welcome the unique bits that PSB content brings them. They know that these programs are made for them. They know that they're made particularly with care, and they know that they're made under scrutiny of organizations that they trust. Of course, we also know from the new BARB data how all the long-form viewing compares. If we look at the top 40 shows of last year, there's only one streamer show. And that, I think, was based on talent developed by the PSBs, one might argue. The underestimated strength of TV was particularly illustrated in the deprivation exercise that we ran. We asked our 32 volunteers not to watch video at all for one full day, but they were offered a single cheat occasion. What did they do? Well, 8 people were very good and they didn't cheat at all. But of those that did cheat, 14 of them chose to watch PSB content, which I think has to be a good sign for us. And additionally, PSB plays to that sense of connection for people, to their own local, regional, or national concerns. And that is all well and good, but I'm afraid there is a but, and it is a big but. We have to urgently recognize that those of us who sit in UK PSBs are sitting on a generational time bomb. Of course, it's universally true that the world in which you have been socialized calibrates your cultural compass. And if we look at the top 40 shows for young people, 14 of them are streamer shows. The brands for young people are on different services, and the young people themselves navigate differently. I don't think we yet know what that will mean, but it is safe to say that there has been much more profound change for them than there was for their parents. And if we look at where Gen Z are building their brand loyalties, they are not particularly with PSBs. Young people have a weaker affinity for and a weaker recognition of PSB brands. It's both because of their stage in life, and it's also because their age group has a whole different set of brand priorities. It's what we would call both a life stage and a cohort effect. And we don't believe that the inevitable change that their life stage will be enough to counteract the cohort effect. PSBs would be dangerously complacent to rely on younger viewers naturally migrating to traditional viewing as they put more candles on their birthday cakes. In particular, with this younger group, we're in a global versus local fight. YouTube and SVODs are able to deploy so much more content. And this problem is more pointed in the UK than anywhere else because we share a language with the US. So we are more actively competing for their attention with US content than in other countries. Our study does show that British PSB brands are valued by young British people. Let's not forget, they prefer our content when they can find it. And incidentally, recent research shows that when they're watching Netflix, only 10% of the original content they watched came from the UK. So they do prefer UK-originated content. But we would be wrong to think that all our young people are waiting for BSB shows. Therefore, we have to go hunting for them. So as I wrap this up and bring the experts on to ask them about that, what should we take from this? Overall, I think there are two main conclusions. One is we're fighting for our business lives, and two is we may just about be able to win that fight. People, even young British people, feel a need for what our content can bring them. And if we make content that they can trust, and content that is salient, and content that is relevant, and content that's informative, then they want it more than other content, and they value it. But for young people to find that salient content, it needs to have ubiquitous prevalence in their every video day. They trust our brands, but they're simply not exposed to them enough. Now, there is a win for us here, commercially as well as socially, if we work creatively to reach young people. And more importantly, I think there is a win for young people too. But to do that, we will have to change our ways of distributing content. It might mean more proactive dating between PSBs and social platforms than we have been pursuing. We might even need some cross-species mating if we really want to succeed. But without a doubt, we need to work together. British PSBs need a united front, a combined effort, and we need to ensure that adequate prominence legislation is passed and passed very soon. And that is also why, through our jointly PSB-owned company, Everyone TV, we've just announced Freely, a service that will ensure that broadband-only homes can get free access to live PSB TVs, not just through VOD in the streaming age. Because we do need to be sure that that valuable and trusted British content, which we believe is already relevant to our young people, is very much prevalent for them. We can't expect them to happen upon it when there's simply so much to watch. So thanks for listening to me, and I'm now going to ask our experts to come and help me find more answers as we wait for Parliament to give us the change we need. So first to the stage, I'm going to welcome Ronan Harris, who's EMEA President of SNAP, and Behavioral Scientist and Consulting Director for Behave, Leah Karam. So after listening to all that, tell me on the count of three, do you believe there's too much to watch? 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes, okay, good, you agree. Let's see where we can go with that. I think there is too much to watch. I think there is. But Leah, do you want to tell us, you're a behavioral scientist. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Yes, so I'm going to explain to everyone, obviously. So behavioral science, obviously, especially in our field, when it comes to comms, is all about understanding through human behavior when it comes to our interactions, the content we consume, our everyday habits at the end of the day, because that anchors us in a certain environment. So essentially what I do is I merge psychology with data science and technology, and also obviously my background in the science behind what we do, especially in comms, to actually understand real human behavior, not over-predicted, under-predicted, but really look at target groups, understand what's happening with us, understand what's happening in the market, and find actionable solutions that actually mirror that behavior. So it's a very, very exciting field at the moment, especially with all of that and that ecosystem.
And when you look at that, what does, one of the things we researched is what choice overload does to people, what happens? Because it's not what you might expect, right? So when you're looking at choice overload, what is the consumer reaction to that? What are their behaviors?
So when it comes to choice overload, usually what it creates is the paradox of choice. So at the end of the day, when you have too much choice, and I have a lot of experiments around that, obviously I'm happy to share different bits and pieces, but it creates a paradox of choice around the fact that, the less is more. You end up not making a choice. Now, when it comes to the context of video consumption, because again, it's different based on the context, where you watch, if it's VOD, if it's a different kind of platform, if the intent is search versus, scrolling through content. But when it comes to video consumption and scrolling through the content, I think there are four main, outcomes from that. The first one is, and we might all know it, especially a certain generation, is the fear of missing out. So this is anchored in us because of two behavioral factors: social proof and social norms. That's our social ecosystem. That's where the world is happening. And loss aversion. Loss aversion means that something highlights our shortcomings. Something highlights the fact that we're missing out on something specific, and we feel losses more than gains. So when it comes to social proof and loss aversion,
So FOMO makes you feel loss aversion.
Yes.
And then you're more worried about losses than you are about gains.
Yes. So behaviorally, you feel losses more than gains. One loss has more of an impact on you than several gains, those negative outcomes. Now, what short-form video does in some instances is that it creates this sort of shortcoming that makes you feel like, one, you're missing out on something, you're missing out on a trend, you're missing out on your friends, and two, social norms. You're missing out on your social ecosystem. Now, the second bit that choice overload creates is what we call decision paralysis. You end up not creating meaningful connections when it comes to a certain video you consume, when it comes to actually making meaningful decisions about what to share, what to like, because there's just so much. The third factor is what we call maximizers versus satisficers. In the world, in general, we've got two types of people.
Maximizers versus satisfiers.
Yes, maximizers are usually those that want to maximize the outcomes. They're usually very unhappy because there are so many choices, especially in those worlds, and a lot of people smile, so I think
feel like
people
we've
can
all
see
met
themselves.
them.
You're going to know why, because basically satisficers are those that are okay with potentially something average. They don't want to see what's out there. The world, as we know it, is becoming filled with maximizers, and that's really, really worrying. Now, the fourth bit I want to talk about, and I think it's quite relevant to you, Ronan, as well, is what we call filter bubbles and echo chambers. So choice overload in this day of age, it doesn't just happen across a lot of different, a lot of diversity of content and all of that. It happens in filter bubbles sometimes. So you're anchored and you kind of go through content that's so relevant to you and your fast viewing habits, when you were sad, your context, your viewing preferences, that it ends up anchoring you basically based on your beliefs. So it can reinforce your beliefs. It can make you very political. So again, those are the four main elements that I see coming up.
FOMO?
FOMO. Yes, the first one is FOMO, so fear of missing out based on social proof and loss aversion. Second one is decision paralysis. Third one, we've got way more maximizers than satisficers. The audience really they started nodding at that point, so I don't know if we have a lot of maximizers here. And the fourth one is essentially filter bubbles and echo chambers. That worries me a lot.
That anchors you in the same kind of opinion.
Exactly, and this worries me a lot because then you end up having people that are so anchored in their political beliefs based on the same stream of content that they see coming up constantly, that it's like, oh my God, it biases them even more. So there are a lot of different elements, but for me, those are the four primary elements that are happening in terms of behavioral psychology when it comes to video consumption.
And the FOMO and the choice overload and the loss, that stops people sampling new things. And the maximizers and the anchoring keeps people sampling the same kind of things.
Yes,
well.
Yes.
So they all lead to that
reduced
amount of choice being made.
Yes, exactly. So based on decision paralysis and the fact that you don't want to miss out on something, but at the same time you want to maximize whatever you see, and then at the same time you follow content that anchors you in something. There's just too much choice out there that you end up having different phenomena that either anchor you way too much in your recent biases with very, very in-depth algorithmic content, but then the algorithm learns from humans. If you're going to leave that with humans, we're known to be irrational. That's why my job exists. That's why we're known to be emotional. If you leave that based on our viewing preferences, we're going to end up having a content stream, especially when it's not based with friends and family, for instance, which is what you do really well, but it's based to like broader content. You're going to end up biasing people quite a lot.
And okay, I think I've got it. But I'm not sure. But I think it basically leads to that loss aversion, and FOMO leads to fear of sampling something new. So you just watch Friends again because you know what you're going to get. But equally, you herd instinct towards anything new that other people have recommended. You don't go off and sample for yourself. But Ronan, the other pieces about the anchoring and so on, so much of your video content on Snap, I assume, is served by algorithm. With that being so much of the young person's day, how does Snap approach that? How do you deal with the concept of young people feeling anxious about that?
I'm currently wondering if I need an algorithm to overcome my decision paralysis about whether I'm a satisfier or a maximier, but I'll deal with that later.
We'll talk about it.
So Snap is quite a different platform. We're a communications platform first and foremost, and people come to the platform to engage with their real friends and family. And often that's visual communication because the camera and augmented reality play a huge part in that. The content that they then go to first and foremost is content, stories that are created by their immediate friends and family. And beyond that, it's content that they've subscribed to. Our platform is quite different to the open video platforms you get out there because the content comes from on our Discover feed and from on our Spotlight product. It comes from a curated set of Snap stars and media partners. So it doesn't have that same sense of virality around sensational content that you get elsewhere. And it's primarily driven by the interactions that you have with your friends and family and also the stuff that you actively subscribe to. So
your algorithm for how you would be served that content or prioritize that content is based off what you've been doing personally. Yeah, and
we've done some research in partnership with NeuroInsights to see what is the feeling of the community that come to Snap every day. And our community talks about Snap being the happiest place that they spend time online. And the underlying drivers behind...
Not a great comparator set, though, is it?
Well, I think it talks back to some of the things that you found in your research that makes PSB content so important. It's about stuff that's culturally relevant. It's about the community that you're part of. And if your primary function on Snap is about communicating with your friends and family, and it's about seeing the stories about their day-to-day lives, then I think that's what it's providing. It's that culturally relevant content. It's about the community that you're part of, and it gives you that kind of happy, more positive feeling. And I think that results then in people wanting to spend more time, and it creates the positive engagement we see for brands and advertisers then as well.
And Leah, in that research, we found that the stuff that people feel unhappiest about is where they feel they've gone a bit out of control, right, when stuff's algorithmically served to them. I mean, is it a concern for you as you look at consumer behavior and reactions about AI moving people away from what they might have been intending to watch? Just expand a bit more on what you think the concerns about that are.
I honestly think from my point of view, it's definitely a concern because you obviously spoke about the fact that the intention to go on the platform is there, but then the intention to watch a type of content is not. I think that's a very, very important point because at the moment, when we look at AI-based content, when we look back to filter bubbles and echo chambers, for instance, that again gives you content that's relevant to you. This is what obviously big tech we spoke about that has to step up to be a force for good and to do a lot of due diligence when it comes to that. Because at the moment, what people go to when we call that the default option, they go to their For You page, for instance, on TikTok. They go to recommended content. That's their default option as it stands, and we we've seen that statistic. So it's the default bias, as we call it. So for instance, what we need to work hard towards is to get them to discovery pages, to get them to explore new topics and new content. And that's going to sway away from what we call, again, loss aversion that we spoke about, where they feel like they're missing out on so much content. They're feeling losses if they're not on their phones, so they have to be on their phones. But again, if they actually go to discover content that doesn't make them sad in some instances, and I think Snap does that really well, and we spoke about that, then it's going to be better, because at the moment, it behaviorally, and I wrote a piece about that, it's actually changing behaviors. TikTok, it actually creates behavioral change. It gets people to sway their voting decisions to some extent based on some triggers on the platform. So it's really important to kind of tackle that. And I think in tech as well, that's going to be a huge challenge that stakeholders will.
And it gets people to change their behaviors because of the concentration of what they see.
Exactly. So imagine seeing really misogynistic content. As a woman, if you got a lot of little boys watching content that comes to them that's very sexist, they look at, I don't know, Andrew Tate content constantly, they're going to be kind of constantly bombarded with those types of influencers, those types of mottos, those types of quotes. So it's really important to regulate the algorithm. It's also really important for those platforms to empower discovery pages, explore pages.
Or prioritize.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a choice for the platform.
That's a choice for them, but if they want to do something for the good of the world, they're going to have to.
Yeah. And that's how our platform is structured. So the first part of video content that you come across is the friends and family content and the stuff that you've subscribed to. Then it's the discover. So it's stories from, Channel 4 and the Great Bake Off, BBC and EastEnders, or the other media partners, or indeed the Snap stars that we have on the platform. And then the third step is where you go into more of the entertainment video format. And I think that's what contributes to this happier mindset.
What's the feedback from young people of how that's working for them on Snap? What are the things that you worry about most for them?
So I think, people should definitely, we like to reinforce the fact that this is about being with your friends and family, and it's about connecting with the content that you actively choose to connect with. But the discover aspect of our platform is also really important, and having a strong mix from our media partners as well as from Snap stars around the topics that you've selected, you've got interest in, is, I think, a great way to give a positive experience. So, I was in the car on the way up here. I was in Discover, I was delivered an article from Guardian talking about the latest law changes in Iran about constraining women's behavior and their fashion, and how it's going to be implemented. It was quite, something I would never have actively searched for, but I found hugely informative.
Should have been searching for that.
Yes, exactly, and that was the point.
But what worries you?
Well, I think with all of these things, I've got 2 teenagers at home, and they live their lives through Snapchat, and I worry that they spend too much time consuming any one type of content. I worry that they get taken down, these wormholes that we all get taken down in our viewing habits, and whether that's on one of the streaming platforms or one of the open platforms, and that it becomes a singular type of content. And I think, this sense of discovery, this broad catalogue of content that's relevant and is kind of going to provide some sort of valuable information, I think is hugely important. As soon as content loses that sense of value, I think it could become quite destructive to how people's mindsets work.
I think I'm going to move on a sec to the other guests, but what you're saying there is, from a behavioral point of view, FOMO and choice overload create concentration, so you sample less. Even though there is more, you sample less. The dangers are in being served a consistently narrow thread of points of view.
Yes.
And there is a natural way that occurs because of algorithmic serving, and that from your research actually shows it will sway people's decision mindsets.
Yes,
on things.
Completely.
I get your point, Ronan, that for Snap, you try and focus on what people have already shown as interest areas through friends and family, but there is still the potential. And I know you vet the content, but there's still the potential to end up stuck in a place which reduces perspectives.
Yes, completely. And if you keep moving like that, one will have less meaningful connections with content. You scroll, you don't know what to engage with anymore. There's way too much. And to
So
again
reduced concentration span, reduced engagement,
reducing
reduced
depth
content of point of view.
Yes, exactly. But again, it's also a world of opportunities, though. There are opportunities. You've got ecosystems there. We've seen with an education experiment that the student recruitment ecosystem is completely disrupted with short-form videos. The way students consume content and all of that. So we need to use it, and it's never going to disappear. The shock of the new is nothing new, But we're going to have to kind of do our due diligence to do that in the right way.
And a final point of view on global versus local. Ronan, do you care how much of that content's UK or not? Is that a problem for Snap?
100% care. So again, Snap designed to be different, and localization of our platform and our content was a big focus for Bobby and Evan when they kicked off. And it's led to huge success in a bunch of different markets where we were one of the first to appear in a local language. And in the UK, we focus on making sure that there's a broad suite of both media partners who provide content, and also local Snap stars. So it's the Channel 4s, the BBCs, it's the Guardians and the Telegraphs, but it's also Snap stars like Brooklyn Beckham. It's some of the other content creators like Pink News, and they're the ones that are getting huge traction on the platform because people have selected those interest topics and they're getting locally relevant content about the communities they care on.
All right, well, look, thank you very much to both of you. I'm going to move on to my next guest, so you can go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We found in our research that Brits connect much more deeply with shows that are steeped in their own neighborhoods or cultures. Now, that's not necessarily a universal good for producers who want to sell globally, but it is what we found was they prefer local. But I've got a special guest to talk about the differences between global and local and how you deal with this as a producer. She's the perfect expert to analyze this. So welcome to the stage, Angela Jain, Director of Unscripted UK from ITV Studios. Right, very good, Angela. I've got my clipboard.
Thanks,
ready.
Alex. I made it to the stage in one piece, at
You made it
least.
to the stage, yeah. Guess number 2. Right, is there too much to watch, and what can be done to make things stand out when you're trying to get them away?
Well, unhelpfully, I think I'm going to give you a yes and no answer. So I think there is too much TV to watch, and my to-do list just gets longer and longer, and then it drops to the bottom, and I haven't watched what I wanted to watch. But I think that's a bit like saying there's too many books and there's too much art, and I wouldn't want to diminish the amount of voices there are out there creating new content. So I think the challenge is really about how you stand out and how you get noticed when there's so much vying for all of our collective attention. That's what I think.
And does that lead you down a route of, so in Unscripted, of just having to make things more and more salacious or more and more cast up in order to make them different to what went before?
No, I don't think so. I think in the end, when we're thinking about how do we create a hit show that travels, there are certain market trends we have to respond to. So for example, it's not impossible, but it's really difficult to find a panel show that travels. For example, the market at the moment is saying we don't really want quiz, we want more reality, we want more entertainment, we want some more talent shows. So what we try and do is respond to that, but I think we have a unique way of working when we're coming up with ideas, which is particularly British. So unlike the sort of auction US version of selling, what I think is uniquely British is the process of creative collaboration between the buyer, the commissioner, and us, the producer, the seller. And so much of all of the stuff that we've had huge success with has been part of a constant creative conversation where the buyer, hopefully the best ones, the best commissioners, are brave enough to...
Like Channel 4.
Yeah, like Channel 4. We work a lot with Channel 4, by the way.
Sponsor of this.
They understand, they walk in the shoes of the viewer. We understand how to come up with creative ideas to fill their problems. But I think the bravest commissioners understand you can't answer all of the questions before the green light. and that actually the alchemy of the production process and the diversity of voices that come to that mean the set designer contributes to the look of the show, the music score becomes really important to it. All of that alchemy is what creates a hit show, and it's a voyage of discovery. You don't quite know what you're going to get when you set out, and hopefully it's better. In a few instances, it's not, but hopefully the process of production actually makes an idea better than it was.
Is that very different if you're pitching to a streamer?
Well, streamers by definition, broadly speaking, have bigger budgets, so we're making a lot of shows for streamers. We're making The Reluctant Traveller for Apple, we're making Bugs Life for Disney, we are making Squid Game The Challenge for Netflix, their biggest unscripted show ever, and they have a different rights position. So that may create a different conversation, but I don't think it ultimately changes what you're trying to do when you're conceiving a show that you hope will have universal appeal. And I think the trap, and this is a very obvious thing to say, the trap you can fall into is go, oh, well, I want to make this as broad as possible, so I'm just going to throw everything at it. I think some of the most successful shows have got quite singular voices and can feel very local and very culturally specific, and they're the ones that tend to pop. And I think if you overthink this, and I promise you I'm not trying to simplify this, but I've spent my entire life trying to work out the content that young people want to watch. I think if you overthink it, you end up down a rabbit hole, and I think what you have to do is really focus on what is good, what's creative, what is slightly different, what's distinctive about your idea, and then really hope that it gets nurtured through the landing process, because that nurturing and the marketing and the press and the PR is critical to the show's success.
And how is that? So one of the things we talked about there was in the research that young people do prefer that British PSB content when put in front of them, right? But it's the putting in front of them that's partly the challenge. So when you're making that, how do you deal with that balance of, as part of a bigger PSB, how you have to try and craft that in versus the challenge of making something singular that stands out for them? Is that a balance that can be struck, or is it unrealistic?
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can create, for example, if we're talking about co-viewing, I've got two teenagers at home as well. Not for much longer. Say goodbye.
That's why we're all here instead.
And we've just finished watching Top Boy together. I don't know if you've seen it, but oh my gosh, it's so singular in its language, in its content, in what it says. And it's been an amazing co-viewing experience. And that, whilst it is on Netflix, but obviously started on Channel 4. Started on Channel 4. I've given you the attribution there. Started on Channel 4. Feels, in many ways, very PSB.
And there's no conflict there between those two?
I don't think so. And I think I think, you know, PSB that is trustworthy, that creates unique British talent as a sport, the British creative industry, I think we're genuinely, I hope this doesn't sound self-aggrandizing, but I think we're genuinely original thinkers, because I think our process of creative collaboration is about allowing a lot of voices into a decision and into the production process. I mean, the unintended consequence of that, though, is it can really slow down the process. So you don't want it to do it to the point of dilution of voices. But I do think the creative collaboration that we can harness together is pretty joyful.
And so when you go back to then how you talked about how do you get one of those shows away, how do you market it once you've been through a hopefully collaborative, not too slow commissioning process. Social media has got the potential to create this kind of virtuous circle where things are being promoted. It also has the potential to create a very negative loop, and obviously you've dealt with shows like Love Island, which maybe is on both sides of that. I don't know what you'd say. But there's definitely an online feeding frenzy around it at some times. I mean, is it something that you feel you must have for a young skewing show? Or is it sort of a side effect that's sometimes happy?
I do think it is actually quite important, and you're right to point out that for good and for ill, social media is very much a part of the success of Love Island. But I think one of the smartest decisions we made right at the very beginning was to embed the digital team on location with the production team in Mallorca, to create a feedback loop. And effectively, the team were monitoring social media so we could really understand how the viewer was responding to the content. And we would change, as we were able to, because it's a fast turnaround show, we were able to change the editorial if we felt that one character was coming to the foreground more than the other and really respond to it. And what that meant was it was much easier for us to get a direct connection to the young audience because we were talking to them where they were. And that's really important.
What were you doing? Were you kind of monitoring sentiment analysis or characters
All
and
of
then
the
changing the production flow based on that?
Absolutely. And it created an amazing feedback loop for us, which was very immediate. And it's been absolutely one of the cornerstones of the format. You know, it's sold in 27 countries now. When we embarked on that, that was not a show that, I mean, I commissioned it. It was a show I commissioned for ITV2. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'd like this to sell in 27 countries. It was very much made for a young audience that watched ITV2.
And how different is it in the other countries? Is it less PSP, more PSP in the other places?
We work really hard to create a consistency in that show so that it doesn't get diluted in the way that it is made. And for obvious reasons, we take duty of care really seriously. So I would say it's pretty consistent.
Do the other countries care about duty of care? Is it different across the world?
We do, so they do.
That's very clear. Directive there from ITV, write that down. So just going back to this, I mean, obviously I agree with you about UK PSBs and our commissioning process and how creative and wonderful we are, but quite small, aren't we, UK PSB compared to these global players? You look at the chart of the massive YouTube bubble and Netflix bubble, YouTube are coming on next, but as you look at that, do you think UK PSBs will just be left behind if we keep clinging on to all these things, like duty of care and original creativity and rights and continuing to innovate? You know, are these realistic in the modern environment?
Well, I think you're right to point out that our children are growing up in a completely different environment to ours. And if I look at it through the prism of just my children and all of their friends, they have no particular loyalty to anywhere. They will chase the content where they can find it. And I think that doesn't mean that all is lost for PSBs. It's about actually amplifying what PSBs do really well and their trustworthiness and the way that you're able to create a brand identity for bringing kids in. But I think it would be false and sort of slightly hopeless to think, oh my gosh, they'll just come to you because they have a loyalty to Channel 4 or to ITV or to the BBC. I think you have to work really hard to talk to them where they are and persuade them that something that you've got to say, they're going to enjoy, learn from, be excited by, and then more importantly, want to share with their peer group because they're going to be the biggest advocates in making your show a success.
That's an interesting point, though, about how much work we have to do to make sure that there are shareable pieces. And
it's really important, and that's when, you know, short-form content and long-form content, can work so well together, because if you can feed some of that short form into there, you can create another virtuous loop, I think.
So for your children, ask the others this, what issue do you worry about the most with all of this video content watching and observing it at home?
Well, I think it's what Leah was talking about. What I worry about is that they will just be fed what they already know, and that voyage of discovery will disappear, and actually just stumbling across something that you wouldn't expect to watch and then finding joy in it does really worry me. And I would encourage everyone to just keep thinking about ideas that have purpose and point and feel exciting and slightly different, because we're all creative people in this room, and I want more content, more books, more art. I can't get enough of it. So I'm probably the unhappy person who's a maximizer. But I think we're in a great place to provide all of that for young people. And young people give me hope. If it wasn't for young people, I wouldn't do my job.
So you were saying you're a maximizer, not satisfied.
Yeah, I think I probably am. But I can always have more. And there's so many new voices that we haven't heard from that we have to nurture and get to the screen. That's genuinely exciting.
Well, it's a really interesting question, because what we're seeing with young people who come into the workplace, Gen Z, particularly post-pandemic, and with this concentration of short-form content, is they haven't got the skills to debate things. They haven't got the skills to sort of discuss, and they haven't got the skills to disagree and commit, because they haven't been raised, particularly with being out of colleges, to have those kind of debates, to get to the point where you've got people with a difference of opinion to you and you're happy to work alongside that. And that is a kind of really dangerous step change, in my view, that we're seeing.
I agree, but I think that's where PSBs can also step in terms of making sure that different points of views are, put on the television. And that's a real responsibility of PSBs. That diversity of thought and opinion is super important.
Yeah, and tolerance of different perspectives.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Angela. I'm now throwing you out of the stage.
Thank you.
But
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So earlier I referred to the generational time bomb. Can we defuse it, or has it already been gone off when we've been sitting on it? So who better to answer these questions than the people who played a major role in setting up that bomb in the first place? Welcome to the stage, Pedro Pina, who is the VP of EMEA for YouTube. Welcome, Pedro, nice trainers. So 500 hours of content are being uploaded to YouTube every minute. Not so much of it today, presumably by Russell Brand. So even with that volume of content being uploaded every minute, do you think there's too much content?
There's a lot of content, and from my point of view, I was listening to the previous guests, and my point of view with what really, really matters is that there's a lot more diverse content that ever existed before. I don't know about you, but my interests when I go on video consumption, I'm sure they're very different from yours. So I'm a history buff. I spend a lot of time understanding World War II, stuff like that. I'm an LGBTQ member, and I'm interested to understand what the community is looking at. I'm a father of 2 children, and I'm constantly concerned about how I'm raising them up, and I welcome tips from everyone, but especially from you two. I'm pretty sure my profile is very different from yours, and this is the beauty of platforms like YouTube. Like, I need to consume this, I need to find this content, and we like to provide the audience what they want, and it's great to see that everyone that has a camera can produce content and find the content outside, and because of that, because of all this content needed to be created in order to address your profile, which is different from mine and different from everyone in this room, we just created a massive revolution of creativity in this country. Outside of the M25 round, I mean, we have creators that are incredibly successful in Glasgow, in Belfast, in Edinburgh, in Manchester, Cardiff, you name it. It's really deeply ingrained now, this creativity revolution that is happening across the world. And by the way, these are people that are exporting, to your point, or local versus global, they're exporting talent and exporting their creativity. More than 85% of the creativity that is created at YouTube in this country is actually watched outside. So talk about Britain going global with its values and with its creativity. So is that a lot? I don't know. It's a lot more diverse, and the audience is actually global. It's not UK only, and that is incredibly, incredibly exciting for us.
So you're saying there's not too much, and you've hit all the major regions and nations there, so that's good. Well briefed. But when you're like working YouTube, just tell us a little bit about how many people are watching, what's their average watch time. You and I talked about this before, because sometimes people who are not on YouTube so much don't understand like what the length of watch time is and the shift towards long form.
Well,
long pieces.
We are a platform because of the reason I just explained. I mean, we touch 96% of the population of the UK literally every month, and I think your research was incredibly complimentary to YouTube as by the fact that it's acknowledging our presence in all those states of mind, all those moments, and we are a platform where people come and find their passions, their love, their points of interests all the time. And what we try to do is deliver against what they really, really need. And what we know nowadays is the audience wants to have access to that information in all surfaces, all moments, all types of forms, long and short, depending on the time of the day and their mindset. Audio and video, it doesn't really matter. So we want to make sure that we can find them and meet them where they are, and we also want to make sure that our platform provides the tools for the creators and broadcasters to be able to shape their content and deliver them where they are. So Anders has put research out, said that in average in the UK, and 80 hours of consumption of YouTube exists on an average on the population. And what matters to us is
80 hours over.
But it
over what?
For a month, in a period of a month. But what matters to us, it's not about which format they spend on, but it's really how you storytell. I think Angela explained that really, really well, is how we put together different formats to actually tell your story. And we see this with Ed Sheeran. Or Rolling Stone just now launched a new album, but they don't put out the entire songs. They put just short form just to have a sample of the song, then drive it to the long form for you to discover the new world of Rolling Stones, who, surprise, surprise, are coming back.
And when they're doing their 80 hours a month, which I guess is audio and video, because that's more than a couple hours a day, isn't it? Is that, how much is it in one session? Do you have a sort of average of 20 minutes, 40
It really varies, and what we don't find is cross-sections on a per-age basis, because it's really by interest groups, and so it's difficult to really define a single profile. And we are not particularly interested in curating content for specific profiles. We are interested in making sure that we deliver
that everything's available.
that everything is available, and it's determined pretty much by what the audience is looking for.
So we've done a deal with Channel 4, have collaborated with YouTube, and we've got 500, 1,000 hours of long form, like regular television programs up. And the complexity is, of course, is how do you get people to know they're there and to happen upon them. So what would you say as an expert, of what are the behaviors that broadcasters need to move away from, or the kind of stubborn broadcaster behaviors to make sure that their content is found by people on YouTube and is relevant?
Well, Channel 4 is a very good example of what we did. Seriously, what you did with Channel 4.0 was absolutely incredible. First made for digital YouTube channel with digital programming, with digital stars. It was a great start. We worked with most of the people in this room, BBC ITV on just now the Women's World Cup, Sky Sports for streaming. We work across Europe with several broadcasters, the joint venture of a German and a French one, RTS, and we put creators explaining scientific and arts information and popularize that through YouTube. RTS could not be happier. This is a PBS, as I said, a joint venture, a German and French joint venture. We do this with a bunch of German PBSs. So what I would say is, the more we collaborate, the more we work together, the better. We just want to make sure we have the content that people want to find, and through experimentation and us playing a role in helping you reach your goals is where we see the most success. And we would love to do that more and more in this country. We do already a lot. We should do a lot more. And in a lot of ways.
But do you think there are lessons for broadcasters to learn about how you do it, how you get up the algorithm? How to promote the content, how to get brand attribution. These are all the challenges for us.
Yeah, so what I would say is just experimenting, getting your feet wet and your hands dirty with us. It's the way to experiment and really figuring out what is the best alchemy. I loved Angela's word of alchemy. What's the right alchemy to really bring and connect your brand to the audience? And it may be a different solution for you or parts of Channel 4 as it may be for ITV, BBC, and others. That's the first thing I would say. The second one is, from a brand attribution standpoint, I'm a marketer by trade. So do I ever understand the worries about attribution? The research that we have conducted does not see any brand dilution. We haven't seen that happening. The Channel 4 work that we do together with you, we haven't seen any dilution. And, it boils down to marketers 101 on how to avoid.
Because I think that's always broadcasters' fear.
I know, but we don't have any evidence that is happening. Quite actually the opposite. And as I said, sometimes it's really basic technical operational concerns around brand that needs to be done. I mean, BBC One Radio, for instance, puts a sting of 2 seconds at the beginning of their video just to remind everyone that this is brought to you by BBC One Radio. Channel 4 does that very well, and others do as well. And as long as this is marketing 101, and attribution is not lost. We haven't seen it, and it's not a concern.
Do you think, with what we talked about there, and what we heard from the behavioral scientist about the mistrust of algorithms and the negative effects, that you should move towards more human curation in terms of, I know you don't want to be a publisher.
Damn it, you read my preparation notes.
Technically not a publisher. But what worries you? You said you've got 2 kids. What worries you about the potential impact of that? And does it make you think we should have more human curation and promotion in how we push things up the charts?
Yeah, so the way we usually talk about this internally is replace the word algorithm with audience. The algorithm is the audience. The algorithm is a reflection of the audience. It was mentioned at some point in time as well. And so we don't worry about the algorithm because our recommendation engine is designed to find the best content that you are looking for. And by the way, it's designed to find the information that you're looking for and does a good job introducing elements of surprise, just because you subscribe to a specific channel does not mean that we only deliver against that content on your feed. So we introduce elements of surprise, and of course goes without saying that we, of course, always remove borderline content that brushes against our guidelines. We just demote it from our recommendation engine. I'm not particularly worried about our recommendation engine because it's just a mirror and a reflection of our audience, and has been,
but isn't that
per your
heard,
research, has been doing a really, really good job.
Isn't that what we heard from Leia is the problem? That more societally and behaviorally, that more concentration within a specific area, even if it's the area you chose in the first place, is the danger. It's the opposite of the broadcast stream that's the same for everyone. How much discussion do you have internally about how to adjust that or correct for that?
So as I just mentioned, we would worry, but we have introduced elements of surprise, of change. And when it really, really gets challenging, and the examples you brought before are an example of that, is when it's breaking news, big scientific moments, big elements of polarization of society, and these are the elements where we do a specific effort in collaboration with a lot of the broadcasters to raise the authoritative voices that actually can provide a more comprehensive and full-scale perspective on how to debate and look at a specific controversial issue. So those are the moments where we want to make sure we raise the specific, authoritative content. For everything else, the day-to-day stuff, we don't worry about that at all.
Okay, so yesterday you took a big decision, maybe it wasn't you, but obviously Russell Brand is a big topic, and he was, is a large, a well-followed creator on YouTube, but he took quite a big decision yesterday, which was to turn off the monetization. Yeah. What will that do, turning that off? How does that work? What does it mean?
Well, essentially he's not able to make a living through YouTube. So we don't believe that should happen. We took swift decision. It was less than, 12
Big
hours?
decision to take. Doesn't it mean, the way I understand the algorithm, that also the content will naturally fall in the algorithm, because the algorithm also prioritizes content that can be monetized. So won't there be a sort of natural diminution in how that content appears by virtue of switching off monetization?
There's no connection between one and the other. So our recommendation engine is designed to find the content that you are looking for or you're interested in or what your passion points are. Monetization comes as a consequence. So if you're part of an audience that is important to an advertiser, we just make sure we will.
So there'll be no prioritization impact as a question of that decision. And what would make what would have to happen to make the decision to take it off altogether? I know that's a really difficult question for YouTube because it strays into editorial.
Just to be clear, we don't tolerate harmful content inside the platform. Right now, from what we know, we don't have harmful content by Russell Brand at YouTube. And when there was, an incident in the past of medical misinformation, we removed it immediately from. So we've done it. If we find out over the next days, hours, weeks, that there's more reason to take more action, we will certainly.
You have to, that's a difficult decision for you guys because it's complexity.
Well, the guidelines are defined, so in that sense it isn't. So whether you respect the guidelines or not.
But we in the BBC have stripped off content. There's no guideline that says we have to do it, but that's what we've done. I think that's more complex for you as an organization because you have so many creators.
Well, it's a question of respecting the guidelines regardless of who you are and what you've done.
Great, I'm sure you enjoyed that question. Right, so what's going to survive longer, YouTube or TV broadcasters?
Sorry, go ahead.
What's going to survive for the longest, YouTube or TV broadcasters?
Do we have to choose?
You have to choose. It's your final question.
I refuse to choose. I believe we're going to
be actually together. Work for YouTube.
Otherwise, we're going to work together.
But isn't the obvious answer just YouTube? Okay. Very, very good political answer. Well done. Okay, well, thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you for coming.